Welcome to this, an extra event actually, for our 2021 meeting schedule of the Cardiff Business Club. As always, it's great to see so many of you joining us, and I'd like to thank both our individual and corporate members for their ongoing support, and I'd also like to extend a big welcome to anyone who is new to the club. I will say this, but it's really important too, we have received considerable support over recent months, and in particular from our season sponsors, Cardiff Metropolitan University and Odgers, really do deserve a special mention. Both have been long-standing partners of the club and did not hesitate to support us this season despite the uncertainty and a very different format to the one that we're used to for our annual programme. So the format this evening will follow that of our previous online events. I will introduce our speaker, and after her address, we will undertake a question and answer session. So as per the joining instructions, please would you send your questions as concisely as possible, please, directly to me by clicking into the chat box at the bottom of your screens, and I'll then ask as many as I can in the time we have available. So on to the introduction of our speaker. We are delighted to welcome Professor Cara Aitchison this evening, particularly given that long-standing link that the club has had with Cardiff Met. Cara has been President and Vice Chancellor of the University since 2016, bringing over 30 years of experience in higher education. Prior to her current role, Cara was Vice Chancellor at Plymouth Margin University. She's also held roles at Edinburgh and Bedfordshire Universities, UWE Bristol, and spent her early career in London. Cara really has led a significant growth and change management programme, developing Cardiff Met's reputation, finances, internationalisation, and student experience. However, the pandemic has impacted obviously every sector, but probably none more so than higher education. Universities, as large and complex organisations, have had to adapt their systems, processes, and delivery mechanisms in order to meet the needs of staff, students, and stakeholders working both on and off campus. So we are looking forward to hearing from Cara on how she has prioritised the physical, financial, and the mental health and well-being of staff and students from the outset of the pandemic, and how they have overcome the many challenges that it has presented. The university was recently named the Times and Sunday Times Welsh University of the Year, and it is very much positioned as the university who can act as a driver of inclusive innovation to help businesses rebuild in a post-pandemic environment. Just to finish, Cara is also a council member of the Academy of Social Sciences, as well as CBI Cymru Wales, and board member of Cardiff's Capital Region City Deal Economic Growth Partnership. So ladies and gentlemen, it's my absolute pleasure to hand over to Professor Cara Aitchison.
Thank you, Scott, and good evening, and thank you to Cardiff Business Club for this invitation to speak this evening, and to you for tuning in rather than turning out as we used to do in pre-COVID times. What I plan to do over the next 20 to 25 minutes is firstly to provide an overview of the leadership approach that we've taken at Cardiff Met in relation to the coronavirus pandemic. Secondly, to summarise the university's recent growth and success, which has now established Cardiff Met as a high-performing modern university. And then thirdly, to outline the opportunities, resources, and research expertise that we could now together capitalise on by working in partnership to ensure a sustainable and inclusive economic recovery for Wales post-pandemic. I'll then be very happy to take questions and to provide any further responses after the meeting that might enable us to develop some of these partnerships. But I want to start first by introducing Cardiff Met as a values-driven organisation. And many of you have long-standing connections with Cardiff Met, a university with origins dating back to 1865, and which seeks to be a driver of education and social transformation, a catalyst for innovation and the economy, and a key contributor to inclusive and sustainable growth in Wales and across the wider world. And we strive to be an organisation that doesn't just do things right, but does the right thing. And we talk of our shared values of creativity, innovation, diversity, and freedom. And we seek to work in ways that develop our valued behaviours of leadership, trust, courage, and accountability. And this explicit ethos of values and behaviours which is perhaps more akin to something that we might see in a school rather than a business or a university, has informed both the development of our strategic plan devised in 2016-17 and our responses to the coronavirus pandemic. And this values-driven strategy, delivered, I have to say, by the most outstanding team of staff that I've had the pleasure and the privilege to work with in my career, which, as Scott said, I think it's now running at somewhat more than 30 years, across 7 universities. This team has ensured that much of our recent success, as evidenced by improved levels of student recruitment, engagement and outcomes, has now taken the university to another level. And we've seen increases in the volume, the quality and the impact of our research and innovation, significant improvements in all league table positions in 2020, improvements in staff satisfaction in 2020, and being deemed last year the most sustainable, financially sustainable university in Wales by the Wales Centre for Governance, and then, as Scott mentioned, recently being awarded the title of the Times and the Sunday Times Welsh University of the Year for 2021. And these shared values and purpose has enabled us to establish, I think now, a really cohesive, collaborative and compassionate community alongside a culture of positive competition, high performance, and financial growth and investment. And we're often led to believe that social purpose and economic growth are 2 sides of a seesaw rather than 2 sides of the same coin. And our progress over the last year has cemented our belief that we can deliver for Wales both economically and socially in inclusive and sustainable economic growth. And I now want to turn to how we've translated these values into leadership through the pandemic. And as many of you will have discovered, there's no manual for leading an organization, a university or a business through a global pandemic. At the start of the crisis back last February, March, there was a flurry of publications that emphasized the importance of clear, decisive leadership from the top, where frequent and effective communication is key to maintaining trust, confidence, and resilience throughout a crisis. And at Cardiff Met, I sought to instill in staff the belief that our people are our strongest asset, and that prioritising the physical, financial, and mental health and well-being of our whole team of almost 1,400 staff and over 20,000 students was our single priority. So our single most important objective was ensuring that our people remained of sound body and mind, so that when this was all over, we'd be able to bounce back on the front foot and play a full role in the economic and social recovery of our nation and our people. And very fortunately, the university was in a strong financial position at the start of the pandemic, having made sector-leading financial returns for the preceding few years, and all trajectories for all of our KPIs, or what we call our measures of success, were moving in the right direction. And we therefore had some financial headroom to make a number of decisions that I believe have demonstrated visible support for staff and students who've not simply been working at home, and we're all familiar with this discourse of working at home, but we keep saying to our people, we're not just working at home, we're at home in a crisis trying to work. And in trying to show that kind of empathy and compassion, we've managed to retain all staff on 100% of their salaries. We were the first university in Wales back in March 2020, and again last month at the point of lockdown, to offer all students resident in university operated accommodation a full rent rebate for any weeks when their teaching or their learning was wholly online. And students have suffered tremendously throughout this pandemic, having lost part-time jobs, learning opportunities, placements, international mobility experiences, and the ability to make new friends and gain support through services that would normally be available within the university in an in-person environment. we have sought to translate all of our normal services plus additional services online, and we were the first university in Wales to be able to offer all of our services online at the point of lockdown. We're also the first to develop and implement what we've called a no detriment policy that would ensure that students were not disadvantaged in their degree outcomes as a result of the pandemic. And demonstrating empathy and compassion is one of 4 leadership responses to the COVID crisis that Gemma Doria and Aaron De Smet advocated in their March 2020 Harvard Business Review article titled "Leadership in a Crisis, Responding to the Coronavirus Outbreak." Secondly, they prioritised the value of deliberate calm and bounded optimism. And I was reminded here of the Gramscian maxim that I often refer to: pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. That balance of taking people with you, but remaining hopeful, but not appearing so optimistic that you lose credibility. And I think we've seen, some cases of that through this crisis. Thirdly, they talked of making decisions amid uncertainty and the need to pause, to assess and anticipate, but then to act decisively. And throughout the pandemic, there's been relatively limited advanced guidance for higher education, and perhaps other businesses would say the same. So we've frequently opted to take decisive action based on the best available evidence at hand. And this has often meant running ahead of other universities so as not to leave our students and staff in a situation of uncertainty. And then finally, and echoing all other crisis leadership advice, they advocate communicating effectively, maintaining transparency, and providing frequent updates. And perhaps the single biggest change that I've made to my own leadership practice over the last year, and I now realise I should have done this many years ago. So the biggest change, maybe apart from what we wear to work these days, is writing and distributing a weekly update to staff, a newsletter that comes out at 10:30 every Friday morning and has generally been opened by around 1,000 of our 1,400 staff within an hour. The newsletter has up-to-date, candid and realistically upbeat news of the university's success, while also acknowledging the tremendously difficult circumstances in which staff and students are continuing to work. And I'll now turn to some of the detail of our response to the pandemic. And whilst it has undoubtedly brought the very worst of times for Wales and the wider UK, I believe it's shown the very best of Cardiff Met. Our academic and professional services staff have ensured that high quality learning and teaching has continued and that students' mental health needs are supported. Our health and social care staff and students returned to work on the front line. We've got biomedical science staff who remained at work to pioneer research into antibody testing. Our teacher education students have supported schools, parents, and even our own staff with homeschooling. Our scientists and product designers have created and donated PPE and sophisticated testing equipment to the national effort. Our sports staff have kept our community active with online wellbeing programs. And our estates and commercial services staff have helped us host Wales National Blood Donor Centre and a COVID testing centre. They've managed accommodation and catering for frontline workers. We've housed South Wales Police Force officers who couldn't return home because they might have had shielding family members. And we've also been home to students from around the world, care leavers who have no other home to go to. And in addition, our estate staff have implemented over £1 million worth of adaptations to the campus to try to make it as COVID secure as possible. And over the last 8 months, alongside all of these very tangible operational developments, we've undertaken a project titled What's Next, in which we've sought as a whole organisation to explore the possibilities and priorities of a post-pandemic era. We've asked staff what they wish to retain from these current ways of working. I mean, there are many things that we absolutely won't want to retain, but there are some positives. And we've sought to develop all of those things that we've currently been implementing that we now know have led to greater levels of productivity and higher levels of performance. For example, we'll have no difficulty in committing to the Welsh Government target of retaining at least 30% of working time from home post-pandemic in a bid to sustain both rural communities and reduce urban traffic. Indeed, we're currently working with Cardiff Council to route the cycle superhighway along the perimeter of our Llandaff campus. And we'll also seek to retain our recently adopted practices of reducing email traffic, limiting meetings to the hours of 10 to 4, and recognising that staff have complex lives with multiple commitments, and that flexible working and working from home enables them to improve their health and well-being and their performance at work. So I now want to share with you some of our recent successes. The university has experienced recent growth in its ambition, scope, scale, and reputation in line with our strategic plan, and within a context shaped by our shared values and ambitions and aligned with the aspirations of the Future Generation Wales Act and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And the university's strong financial position resulting from the extensive development of new courses, significant growth in undergraduate, postgraduate, and international student recruitment, and increases in research and innovation has provided that financial sustainability that I referred to earlier and an increased ability now to invest in the future. And student recruitment for this academic year has surpassed target and has increased year on year over the last 3 years to reach a population now of over 11,500 students based at our 2 Cardiff campuses, and a further 8,700 students studying at our international partners in 15 countries. And the closing date for UK undergraduate applications for 2021 entry just passed a week ago, and applications at Cardiff Met are up 16% on last year, while the rest of the UK sector is down 6% overall. So our Cardiff-based students now come from over 100 countries. 18% of our students are international. We have aspirations to grow that further. And over 25% of our students are now studying for postgraduate degrees. Around half of our students are still from Wales, and 37% of our Welsh domiciled students are from the lowest 2 quintiles of the Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation. And I make this point because we also have the second highest entry tariff of any university in Wales, which actually came as a bit of a surprise to me recently, and it might come as a surprise to some of you. And I think this is important because what it demonstrates is that poor background should not be confused or conflated with poor educational attainment or outcomes. And it's that thing of balancing the social and the economic again. We believe we can do both. Student engagement, satisfaction, and outcomes have also improved significantly. In the 2020 National Student Survey, the university achieved 85% overall satisfaction. That's 2% above the UK average and up from 3% below average 5 years ago. Our focus on employability has ensured that 96% of our graduates secure employment or run their own business or enter further study within 15 months of graduating. And 72% of our graduates are in high-skilled employment or higher level further study, while our entrepreneurship team helps students and graduates realise their business ambitions. And for the last 5 years, the university has featured in the top 10% of UK higher education institutions for the number of graduate startups. And the university offers substantial support for graduates who want to start a business, a social enterprise, or a charity. And to assist our 2021 graduates who will be entering a very challenging jobs market, we'll be offering a new postgraduate certificate in entrepreneurial thinking, free of charge to the class of 2021 to try and give them a bit of a head start. We've also seen our staff satisfaction rise from broadly average across the sector a year ago to tracking it between 9% and 30% above average on all measures, such that in the recent staff survey conducted by Capita in December 2020, Cardiff Met was ranked first in the UK as an employer of choice from all higher education institutions that were surveyed in either 2019 or 2020. And the results of the 2020 survey, and bearing in mind this was conducted 8 or 9 months into the pandemic, showed that 96% of staff agree that Cardiff Met is a good place to work. The sector average is 87%. 90% agreed that the university's Vice-Chancellor's executive group, that's the senior leadership team, manage and lead the university well. So that was 90% against the sector average of 60%. And actually we were at 60% just a year ago. So some things have certainly improved. 75% agreed that communication in the university is effective. That doesn't sound great, but we're not a good sector. The sector average is only 50%. And I'm ashamed to say that as a university, only a year ago, we were right down at 35%. So again, significant improvement in the last year. And 74% agreed that they felt valued by the university. Again, doesn't sound too high, but the sector average and where Cardiff Met was only a year ago is 57%. So things are moving up. League table performance has also improved. We delivered significant improvement in all university league tables last year, but we've still got a way to go to achieve our ambition of being a top 50 university in the UK. The two main league tables, the Guardian Good University Guide for 2021 saw us increase by 41 places. It was the highest rise in Wales and the third highest in the UK, but still only takes us to 72nd in the UK, so we're not being complacent just yet. The Times Good University Guide 2021 saw a rise of 33 places, again the highest rise in Wales, third highest in the UK, but still only takes us to 79th, so we've still got a way to go. And the award of Welsh University of the Year 2021 that Scott referred to from the Times and the Sunday Times recognised Cardiff Met's commitment to establishing Cardiff School of Technologies, which was launched in 2018 and now has almost 1,000 students. And this new school focuses on computer and data science, cybersecurity, robotics, and electronic engineering. And it also now has a thriving research community. And the school has recruited 30 staff in the last 2 years, interestingly, mostly from overseas. So there's still a bit of a skills gap in the UK. And we're looking at recruiting, we've now got out to advert over 100 posts for the university to recruit in 2021. And the school works in partnership with industry, and it also offers degree apprenticeship programs in data analytics with the Office for National Statistics. And these programs have been developed to meet student demand and employer need. And modules are developed in partnership with stakeholders from industry and designed to support the growing number of digital and technology companies clustering in the Cardiff capital region. Many of you will be familiar with our work in Cardiff School of Management, a longer established school, and the partnerships it has with industry. For example, the Value Flow Centre has developed and applied contemporary operations management paradigms in aerospace, architectural, automotive, food and medical manufacturing businesses, resulting in just under £32 million worth of company savings through business performance enhancements. And Cardiff Management School has also now established a new LLB law programme, and among 40 new degree programmes established across the wider university over the last 3 years are new programmes in architecture, policing studies, and a new BA primary education studies with qualified teacher status that makes Cardiff Met now Wales' largest provider of qualified teachers. And we've grown not just within these individual schools, but across schools. And the development of our new global academies epitomises this sense of collaboration and internationalisation. And the global academies are new initiatives designed to develop our interdisciplinary, international, and impactful research, innovation, and postgraduate education as catalysts for economic and social growth, both here in the UK and around the globe. And the 3 global academies all tackle global challenges identified by the UN Sustainable Development Goals and national priorities highlighted in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act and economic priorities identified for key sectors of the Welsh economy. And the Global Academies complement and supplement our undergraduate portfolio by offering what we see as a solutions-focused approach, building on our high-quality education that places emphasis on ethical, digital, global, and entrepreneurial skills, something we refer to through the initials of EDGE, the Cardiff Met EDGE. And this approach has helped to secure significant improvements in graduate outcomes and employment through our practice-focused model of professionally recognised degrees designed to deliver economic prosperity, social justice, and environmental sustainability for Wales and the wider world. And our 3 global academies that we have recently launched are Health and Human Performance, bringing together our expertise in public health, biomedical sciences, leadership and management, sport, physical activity, coaching, and new technologies. Secondly, the Global Academy of Food Sciences, Safety, and Security builds on the world-leading work of the Food Industry Centre, which has enabled the sustainable growth of the food and drink industry in Wales, contributing significantly to employment, exports, and the sustainability of rural and remote communities, contributing over £100 million in increased sales and 700 jobs. And then thirdly, human-centred design. This global academy builds on the strong reputation established by our Centre for Product Design and Research, including its pioneering work that has enabled the rapid production of devices for use in surgical procedures, and recognised with the award of a Queen's Anniversary Prize in late 2015. And Scott said I'd actually been at Cardiff Met for just over 4 years. It was that work that absolutely blew my mind and inspired me to think that Cardiff Met could be a really innovative and entrepreneurial place, a place that I wanted to work. And currently working with Kenwood and Allergen, the centre has led to an additional £69 million in sales, with a further £950 million projected in the next 4 years. So using our expertise and a collaborative approach, we're working with a wide range of employers and stakeholders to address these global challenges, always in partnership. We never do anything just on our own. And our international students and partners and our international offices in China, India, Vietnam, and Nigeria, together with excellent links with the British Council, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, and British ambassadors overseas and overseas ambassadors in the UK, all provide links for us to work in partnership with businesses to help businesses in their development of their own trade and exports post-Brexit. So Cardiff Met, just to sum up, is no longer a small university. It's a global community of over 20,000 students with a turnover of more than £110 million, and with one of the fastest growing schools of technologies and fastest improving reputations of any UK university. And we welcome new ideas and approaches from our partners in Wales, the wider UK, and around the globe who want to join us in making our city, our nation, our world a more productive, inclusive, and sustainable place in which to study, work, and live. And we stand ready to work in partnership with businesses and industry across Wales to play a full role in the economic recovery of Cardiff and Wales as we come out of COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Cara, thank you so much for that. Lots to reflect on. I can see lots of people clapping. So it's great to hear so much about what you've been doing with the university in particular through the pandemic. I probably should have declared an interest earlier that I'm actually a governor of the university. So, I've been able to see firsthand how Cara and her team have, really have done so well in terms of preparing, planning, providing the leadership that she described, and almost really being one step ahead of all the kind of different challenges that have emerged. And I think we've probably been at the front of the field in terms of that. So something that is really positive for the university. So as I said earlier, please could you send your questions through to me directly? I already have some, which is great. So I'll start on those and just use the chat facility at the bottom of your screens. So Cara, first question is from Rosie Moriarty Simmons, who's asking, do you think that the current learning will lead to more distance learning in the future, akin to Open University?
Yes, I think it will. I think undoubtedly, and I'd be surprised if any other Vice-Chancellor across the UK answered differently. Scott, you mentioned, or Rosie mentions the Open University. I had the privilege of teaching part-time for the OU way back in my early days, and it was quite an eye-opener. And I certainly saw then the value. The technology was much more limited at that point, but I saw the value in widening access and participation into higher education, and a level of provision that made it possible for people with other commitments, work commitments, family commitments, to take part in higher education. So to widen that group of students that were able to benefit from education. And so I see that as something that would be very important for all universities in Wales. There's actually a relatively low rate of part-time participation in universities other than the OU in Wales. And I think that's a challenge for all 8 universities in Wales. And certainly many of the techniques that we've been developing over the last year will stand us in good stead. And many people have made the joke, how long would we have thought it would have taken the HE sector to convert to online provision? And I think best guess was, something like 3 or 4 years, when in reality, we all did it in 3 or 4 weeks. Nobody died. It was relatively painless. And I think, from those staff survey results, we can tell that people have risen to the challenge. Morale is high, staff satisfaction is high. I genuinely believe that my academic colleagues now think they're doing a better job than they were a year ago. So yeah, we will do much more online after this.
Okay, thank you for that. Robert Chapman's asking, first of all says, I applaud your success and resilience, but from a leadership perspective, how would you describe your redefining of the culture of Cardiff Metropolitan University to make a tangible difference? Yeah,
I think undoubtedly our organisation and its culture has been redefined. I would attribute a lot of that to the pandemic and the way in which we had to respond out of necessity. I think some of those responses and improvements may have happened anyway, but would have taken longer. And many of you know the journey that the university has been on over the last 4 or 5 years, and some of it, looking back 3 or 4 years, was quite painful. It's not even 4 years since we lost 11% of our staff through a voluntary severance program to cut staff costs. That was really painful. That didn't do a lot for morale, but it was a necessary step in order to take the great leap forward. And I think over the last year, we've probably accelerated the cultural progress. So we've improved the culture of the organisation, following those improvements to the finances and structure. And I think normally that cultural transformation, and many of you will know this from your own organisations, takes a long time. So I think what's happened over the last year, bizarrely, time has speeded up and we've moved through that transition much more quickly, partly because it was a crisis and everyone had to pull together. You know, it was a kind of make or break thing, and it's certainly been the making of Cardiff Met.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'm just reading through, we've got loads of questions coming. Paul Thorburn asks, clearly the university has made some significant contributions to many aspects of research into health, wellbeing, physical activity, amongst many others. What impact, if any, do you anticipate from the Brexit decision?
Yeah, Brexit, you know, it's not great for universities. And I think you're probably aware that most university leaders were not supportive of Brexit, in part because it limited opportunities initially for students. So for students to come to the UK and for our own students to benefit from experiences in European universities. On the research front, it's particularly impactful for Wales. So Wales, universities in Wales generated more of their research income from European sources than any of the other home nations. So finding alternative sources for research funding has been preoccupying universities across Wales for the last 3 or 4 years as we work towards this moment. Universities in Wales are pretty adaptable. You know, they're now tapping into some other sources of funding. I think there will be, you know, use the cliche of a transition period as we move out of one stream of funding and into others. It's going to be a challenge, but I think we're already seeing universities being able to do that. And, you know, I guess there's no point in us looking back. Brexit is done. And we just need to look forward and to engage in these global sources of funding. And I think, you know, being a very global university with these strong international links is something that will support Cardiff Met. We actually had a smaller percentage of students from the EU than any other university in Wales. We're very global, but we've kind of jumped right across Europe. We have relatively few students from Europe. Most of our international students, that 18% of our student body I talked about, comes from much further afield. So the impact in terms of students for Cardiff Met is not so significant. The impact in terms of research funding is very significant.
Okay. John Union's asking, what are your students telling you are currently their biggest challenges due to COVID-19?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I guess if we'd been asked that, you know, 10 or 11 months ago, we might have focused on academic delivery and learning online and all of those changes to their experience as a student in the classroom. What they're actually telling us is not any of that. What they're telling us is their biggest concern is the isolation that they've experienced. And you know, if we think back to, you know, most of our students are young people, young students. We don't have a huge number of mature students. If we think back to our younger days, it's when we were all at our most sociable. And so they're missing the social side of things. They're missing the ability to interact with other people. You know, this is a generation, you know, mostly all born this century, which is really scary. This is a generation that are used to working online. They're used to tech. They're used to, you know, playing games online, socializing with friends online, but only as part of a wider experience. And I think they're now finding that their lives are very two-dimensional. So certainly when we get back on campus, we're going to be mindful of all of that kind of social side of things outside of the classroom. It's not so much the learning, it's all of the stuff that happens around the learning that they're missing. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that makes complete sense. So Linda Quinn's asking, given the cost of student loans, do you see two-year degree courses being more available in the future?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's one that we keep returning to. Logically, we would think there should be demand for two-year courses. Interestingly, right across, and it's very much an English and a Welsh phenomenon, you tell the accent, I'm Scottish, where there's a tradition of four-year degrees. Right across the UK, where people have tried to reduce the length of the degree, it hasn't really taken off. And certainly at my last university, Plymouth Marjon, we tried the two-year degree and there wasn't demand. Students wanted the three-year experience. And partly I think it's an issue of maturity and confidence. And if we could crack that, I think there might be demand for the two-year degree. There isn't demand as yet. And I think, we'll continue to try to offer these things because we want to offer a variety of means of learning, a variety of modes of learning. And we just have to, continue with where we find demand. As yet, we haven't found demand for the two-year degree. Strangely, but yeah.
Thanks for that. Ian Price is asking, how do we overcome the challenge of a mixed environment in meetings and lectures? Some seeing not being in the room as a disadvantage.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. At the moment, like lots of organisations, we're conducting all of our major meetings. So my team's exec meetings, our senior management board meetings, we're conducting all of our governing body meetings online. And we've now done that for nearly a year. In some senses, they've actually worked better. They tend to be more business focused. And so we get more decisive outcomes and actions. But what we lose is all of that discussion around the decisions. And so I think we're very clear that we need a combination of both. We might retain the online meetings for our senior management board meetings, but we're aware that we need to build in other ways of working in person. And I think those will be more discursive, more interactive, perhaps more through the kind of half-day away day, the discussions, the workshops. And I think for all of us in education, we've really finally, not before time, started to question the amount of time we spend in meetings. And education is notorious for this. And anyone that looks in from outside just can't believe how much time we spend in meetings, particularly in what's called the new university sector. So Cardiff Metropolitan is a modern university, a new university, and came out of local authority origins. And there is still, I think, a bit of a local authority tradition of having, too many committees and subcommittees and working groups and so on and so on. So I think a lot of that will be pared back. And we may well work in that dual way. I think we will certainly trial that and see if it works.
Yeah, well, Ian's just added there's a feeling that there will be a sort of mix and match approach to meetings and the time saved from not travelling, which makes sense. But it'll be very interesting to see how it pans out.
Scott, if I can come back on that one, I've said obviously we're a local and a national organisation, but we're also a UK organisation and a global organisation. I have to say I haven't missed the sort of 36-hour round trips to Sri Lanka to graduate 1,400 students. And whether we'll do all of that again, I don't know. But what I've really appreciated through this last year is the ability to have much greater engagement with London-based meetings. And I actually just said to Scott and Liz before we went live, my last job was in Plymouth. The one before that was in Edinburgh. And I used to do day trips to London for meetings. And I now look back on, that was probably kind of 7 or 8 years worth. And I look back and think, why on earth did we do that? And I really hope that we don't go back to that way of working, because it's just hugely inefficient in terms of our time, university finances, student fees. I really don't think we should be spending students' money on these kind of trips. But it's also just not sustainable in terms of the environment. So our What's Next group has tried to lift ourselves up and out of the current crisis and think quite creatively about what can we do differently and better when we all get back to something that won't be the old normal.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Ian's added again that actually virtual meetings can be, far more inclusive as well, which I would agree with. Just one final one to finish with, given the university sort of focus on health and well-being, again from Paul Forbin actually, which is to say that the pandemic's highlighted the fact that people with serious underlying health conditions have probably struggled more with the pandemic, obesity being one of those factors. And it was just really, what's your advice to leaders in terms of how we set about addressing this serious problem moving forward?
Yeah, thanks. I think that's actually a really good point on which to close. Some of you will be aware, my background is human geography, but I have an interest in sport, physical activity, health, well-being. And I've been aware of, and in fact helped support a lot of the research over the last probably 15, 20 years on physical activity and health. And I think, at last that area of research has kind of come to the fore and been recognised for the valuable place that it has in both society and economy. This is a social and an economic issue. We at Cardiff Met obviously are very, very strong in that area and have established this global academy. I think it's something though that, it doesn't just sit in health boards and universities. This has to be something that sits right at the heart of every organisation. And I think what we've seen at the university over the last year in our prioritising of health and well-being and our support for staff to work flexibly, to take time off, to take proper breaks, to take annual leave, to take lunch breaks, to use those to be active, to think about their health and well-being. As employers, I think we've all got a role in this. And we've tended to think of, health and fitness as things that belong in the health sector or the sport sector. That's what happens at the doctor's surgery or at the gym. When in actual fact, this is something that has to happen within the workplace and be supported by the workplace and be supported by employers. And it's not a cost. The payback from having a workforce that is healthy and well and upbeat, not just physically healthy, but has good mental health, this will pay back over and over. And we all have, I believe, a duty and a responsibility to ensure the health and well-being of our biggest asset, our staff. Thank you.
No, thanks for that, Cara. And Paul's has added that his daughter, who actually studied at Cardiff Met, very serious sports person, and he thinks that she and many others are convinced that physical activity has played a massive role in helping them through the pandemic. So listen, thank you so much again for joining us, for sharing your thoughts about the university, how you've obviously stood up to the challenges that have clearly presented to all of us recently, how you've moved to online, and clearly the leadership that you've shown across the crisis. But also, your post-pandemic, what your priorities are, what the opportunities are in terms of your growth agenda, supporting students, internationalisation even as well. And also, I think we've had a great Q&A session. So on behalf of everyone, thank you so much for that. Looking out to the audience, I hope you've all enjoyed this virtual meeting and in particular the thoughts and comments that Cara has made. Our next event will be held again, obviously online, and that will be on Monday, the 22nd of February, when our speaker will be Rob Lindley, who's Managing Director of Mitsubishi UK. We will have an opportunity to hear about the challenges facing the motor sector globally on that occasion, and also on the future of Mitsubishi, who have actually announced last year that they are withdrawing from the UK and will not be bringing new brands into this market. Following that, I'm delighted to confirm that through the support provided by the Reserve Forces and Cadets Association of Wales, the first Sea Lord, Admiral Tony Radakin, will be our guest on Monday, the 15th of March, also again at 6 p.m. and again on Zoom. Further details, of course, about these and other future events will be found on the club's website. So thank you again to our season sponsors, Cardiff Met University, obviously, and Odgers. And thank you all again for joining us. We hope that you and your families continue to stay safe and well, and we will look forward to seeing you again in just a couple of weeks' time on the 22nd of February. Thank you very much and good evening.